Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Ethics Lab webinar, where we're going to contemplate the ethical questions posed by generative artificial intelligence. This webinar series is part of our research development program, where we leverage the African humanities in the ethical questions posed by new and emerging health technologies. And we are really deliberate about an Africa-centered approach to these conversations, where we take Africa as a context and point of reference, whether that is in empirical, theoretical, or conceptual terms. This webinar is going to involve 50 minutes of presentation time, 25 minutes for each speaker, and then we'll proceed to a 30-minute question and answer session. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded. So if you'd rather not have your video on for the duration of the presentations and even in the question and answer session, that's fine. When it comes to the discussion, please just put your questions in the chat, or when you come off, if you do want to speak while asking a question, you can also put your video off. That's fine. So today we're going to focus on the ethical questions posed by generative artificial intelligence, and our speakers are in their various encounters in domains like fashion and global health have contemplated what the ideas of aging, race, and Africanness that characterize generative artificial intelligence, and we're really interested in whether generative AI can shift the relations of power in which its inputs and outputs circulate, whether that's shifting in the right direction or shifting in the wrong direction. I'm sure our speakers would give more meaning to these questions. We are joined by Arsenni Alenichev, Dr. Arsenni Alenichev, who is a postdoc fellow at the Ethox Center. He's presenting on behalf of himself and his colleagues, Patricia Kingori and Koen Peters. And here they're using AI to document the racist or stereotypical assumptions and biases that characterize the terrain of global health photography. And we also joined, so he'll start off first, and then and his presentation will be followed by Malik Afegbua, who is a Nigerian visual artist and storyteller, and he's interested in the ideas of aging, Africanness, and race that characterize artificial intelligence. So thank you to both our speakers for your time and for your scholarship. Arsenni, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anya. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk about global health images, both real and fake. Yeah, so in relation to this, I would like to highlight that artificial intelligence should always be, generative AI should always be understood as kind of reflection of reality. And if we talk about global health images that are generated by AI, it's important to also talk about quote-unquote real global health images. So in this presentation, I would like to talk to you briefly about the history of global health images that, I mean, have been historically very racialized, gendered, and marked by visually marked by similarity and difference, and how those kind of tropes and assumptions, they are subtly reproduced as part of generative AI, which is increasingly being understood as something neutral and apolitical. And this presentation would actually kind of create a case for politicizing generative AI as much as possible. I'm presenting on behalf of Patricia Kingori and Koen Peters, who are my mentors who've been helping me think about the global health images. So I'm representing GLIDE, which is Oxford Johns Hopkins collaborative partnerships on ethics and infectious disease. So I would like to start with a little bit of a disclaimer that this presentation contains biased and abusive images, both real and fake. We do not endorse such imagery. We use it as a study materials to learn about the intersection of coloniality and global health. Yeah, so this presentation will be split roughly like in 3 parts. First would be like abstract in the context of images. So it's going to be based on the art exhibition that Kun and I presented here in Ethox a couple of months ago, and it will be enhanced with more images because I rendered many. And I would like to quickly talk to you about like the meaning of that for science society and medical humanities from the global south. So without further ado, let's quickly talk about the substrate of real global health images. As I started doing like the project on global health visuals, I thought that there should be a way of kind of trying to map global health images. And I came with quite a simple 2x2 model, which I think kind of encapsulates most of the global health images. So if we think about two binary positions, first would be like observing and intervening, and the second would be suffering and empowering. We can actually map most of the global health images. So for instance, observing and suffering, this would be your typical poverty porn type of images. You know, people being observed. The North is there as a kind of impartial observer to see the suffering. I mean, historically, those tropes emerged like with the rise of structural adjustment policies that kind of underdeveloped healthcare systems, and there was a lot of visible suffering, and there was a lot of like really bad journalism. But this trope is still reemerging. For instance, these are photos of like Ebola in West Africa. So yeah, this trope is still very present, unfortunately. Then suffering intervening, as probably you can guess, this is your stereotypical old school charity image, right? So people are visually suffering and then they're receiving care from the international organizations as part of collaborative partnerships, well, you name it. And of course, now we're moving towards intervening and empowering. So this is your classic, the trope of the white savior. So for instance, these are the two images that I took from screenshots from websites of global health institutions, and they effectively reproduce this kind of trope. Yeah, and again, there was a lot of criticism of that, and there is this new trope that is emerging, which is observing empowering. So basically, as you can imagine, this is just people being observed and how empowered they are. Like usually, this is like working class people smiling like in fields, or you get the sense. So yeah, so basically if you look about the history of the images, so it started with observing suffering, then suffering intervening, then we moved to intervening and empowering, and then we currently in a context where empowering and observing is the dominant trope. On that note, so all those images, they're online, right? There are like hundreds, probably of thousands of global health images. So what AI does, it kind of absorbs those images and reproduces something similar on demand, like statistically average based on like what is plugged into the system. So yeah, this is already kind of the art presentation that just embedded. So pardon that it's like not perfectly formatted. So the idea was that we decided to try to invert stereotypical global health tropes such as suffering subjects and the white savior to showcase the power balances they entail, because it's not always obvious for everyone. So as we started doing that, we actually realized that you know, it was not pretty much possible to invert those stereotypical global health images, because yeah, let's just again step back. This is just the prompt for Bill Gates' children, right? And there are already kind of assumptions about like what children look like that are saved by Bill Gates. However, if you ask AI to create you the images of white suffering children, it would create you something like this. And similarly, it can create you easily a group of Black African doctors. However, if you ask AI for those folks to take care of these folks, so for Black doctors to take care of white suffering children, and therefore to invert the stereotypical trope, you gotta get something like this. So we ran several hundred prompts and like various prompts, like probing for different kind of wording. And in our rendering experiences, all recipients of care were rendered Black, even though we explicitly ask for Black doctors taking care of white suffering kids. So here's just an example of these prompts, like Black African doctors providing help with vaccines, medicine, or food and water for white suffering children. Again, all the recipients of care were rendered Black. Here's another example. Black African doctors administer vaccines to sick and poor white children in a style of photojournalism. Yeah, again, this is kind of, again, reminder that, global health imagery is never neutral, and now AI is reproducing like similarly biased imagery. Or just look at this image. So this, the prompt here is Black African doctors are giving food and water to poor sick wild children in a style of photojournalism. This is like straight off the bat, almost like a colonial image. This is definitely some missionary vibes coming off that image. However, what is even more problematic, that even though we specifically ask for Black doctors to take care of white kids, sometimes the AI would flip and it would start showing you white doctors instead. So this is effectively reproducing the white savior trope that we're trying to challenge in the first place. So this is the prompt here, is Black African doctor is helping poor and sick wild children. And here we go, the reproduction of the white savior trope. And this is just more examples of that. So this is the same prompts, as you can see, right? Sometimes, again, all the recipients of care are Black. Sometimes doctors are white. So again, which kind of leads to the conclusion that, probably AI couples provision of care with whiteness and the reception of care with Blackness, which is like a very problematic thing that I think many scholars, activists have been challenging, but still it's being heuristically reproduced by AI in a matter of minutes, actually. Just, yeah, more examples. And, we even try to kind of be close to reality and try, let's say, what if we ask for something quote unquote realistic, for instance, Black NHS doctor is to take care of a sick white kid. And it's the same thing. It's pretty much in all the cases, doctors were mostly white and all the recipients of care were Black. And this is like sociologically, it doesn't make any sense just because a lot of doctors in the UK are of migrant background. Or, we just run like 80 repeated prompts for NHS doctor, and it just showed you like all 80 were just white men, which is, again, sociologically very problematic. What is even more insulting, I think, in my opinion, is that when we run prompts for traditional African healer helping poor and sick wild children, sometimes it show you like white people, I don't know, in the midlife crisis that are like wearing stereotypical African clothing, like exaggerated, I would assume. Yeah, so, and again, the prompt was supposed to be traditional African healers helping poor and sick wild children. More examples of that, problematic images, right? I'm just, I probably put too many examples here, but I think those images are striking because it kind of clearly shows you like the biased pattern here. Yeah, and another example, for instance, the prompt is Black African doctor is helping poor and sick wild children in a style of photojournalism. And, in that rendering sequence, like most of the doctors were rendered white. So eventually, probably after 700 attempts, we were able to invert only one global health image, stereotypical global health image. But even in that sense, it kind of it's still very problematic because the kid is like wearing exaggerated and exoticized, I would assume, African clothing and African bodily practices. So even though the image is inverted, there are still kind of cues of Africanness and Blackness that are still attached to supposedly a white kid. And, it's just, we run different prompts, and it was quite shocking to see, if you just look for like doctors help children in Africa, in a couple of instances, we just saw like stereotypically African animals that are supposed to be illustrating Africa, which is, again, I think major problem that like medical humanities scholars have been challenging, right? This kind of exotization and just like straight off the bat Orientalism. Yeah, I actually would be really curious if anyone knows what's the percentage, on the continent, how many people actually saw elephants or giraffes. I don't know if there are statistics like that, but I would assume it would be like a couple of percent as maximum. But still, AI would kind of couple Africanness with stereotypical wildlife. Or another problematic image, right? Like doctors help children in Africa. So this image is like extremely problematic, but in a way, in a very bizarre way, it actually probably reflects the state of global health and asymmetric north-south relations. So the image is problematic, but yet surprisingly, it actually captures something realistic in terms of how, well, the north and south relations have been historically formed. Yeah, and this study suggests that, yet again, that global health images should be understood as political agents, and that racism and coloniality are embedded social processes manifesting in everyday scenarios, including AI. It's kind of interestingly enough, if you run for prompts like white saver in software, it will actually tell you that this is against our community standards because it's a bad prompt and it's disrespectful of people and communities. However, if you try to invert that textually, that trope, it's still going to reproduce it. So it kind of, like this kind of almost like naive assumption that racism and coloniality can be fixed by, adjusting some textual outputs or kind of banning certain things. No, it's just like fabric of societies has to change. And another kind of very problematic thing that we encountered is that we ran 152 repeated searches for rendering prompts, for HIV patients receiving care, and 150 prompts they showed Black patients. So which could lead to a conclusion that AI somewhere deep inside couples HIV with Blackness or provision of HIV with care with Blackness. Yeah, and another problematic thing is that global health organizations are already using AI rendered images for marketing and communication, and which I think it's problematic, and we need to have a discussion about this. So, for instance, this is a WHO image that is shared on Twitter, and this is AI generated. It was created in the same AI that we used for this exercise. Or another extra rendering prompts, wild children under mosquito net in a poor neighborhood. I even ran like variations of that image. They all showed just Black kids, I would assume in Africa, somewhere in the continent. Or another thing, just think about the role of verbs and adjectives. So for instance, this is a prompt for poor hungry children. Like you see a lot of like white folks, white kids. However, if you add a verb, 400 children receive food and water, the ethnicity and the like imagined sociological background changes drastically. So, even like verbs, they kind of modify probably they kind of showcase the biases and how they are like deeply embedded in AI and in our societies at large. And I even tried to run for like very kind of specific prompts, and yeah, I wasn't successful. This is like the prompt for traditional African healer is feeding a white pale child with blue eyes in a hospital under the mosquito net in the style of candid photojournalism. And as you can see, like the images, like especially the fourth one, it's beyond problematic. Yeah, I would like to reflect on that complexity, but I would need your help to do so. So first and foremost, like generative AI is feeding on real content, and therefore it's never neutral or apolitical. And I think we should actively resist the neutral and apolitical understanding of AI as the technology moves forward. Second, how do we meaningfully engage with the humanities from the global south about the intersection between AI and global health and move beyond, simplistically reducing them to local expertise that, that the global south is just a slightly different manifestation of what is in the global north. So how do we find like power and resilience and push back? And how do we move beyond AI safety studies. For those of you who might not be familiar with this term, AI safety studies is like something that dominates the current discourse around AI. So it's about, making sure that AI is done properly, and it kind of bypasses the social and political dimensions of AI technology. And the third question that is primarily directed at all of you. So what does this relationship between real and fake images teach us about colonization and decolonization, proliferation of social records, and the subject system? That note, I would like to thank you
So,
for your attention.
Thank you very much, Arsenni. Do you mind just repeating the last question you?
Oh, sorry, it was
broke a little bit.
Oh, I just read it from the slide. So if it's not too annoying, if it's not too annoying, I can read it again. But we can just leave it on this slide.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm now going to invite Malik, and I'm going to share his presentation just now. So Arsenni, do you mind stop sharing your screen? And okay. Malik, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Just give me the prompts to move to the next slide.
Oh, yes. Okay. So it's great to be here. My name is Malik. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a content creator, director, producer based in Nigeria. Been working in the film industry for like 13 years. I shoot TV commercials, and so working with the AI and all of that is like a byproduct of actually what I do. It's not actually what I actually do, but obviously, like, we're in 2023, and the way technology grows, it's been what I've been doing for the past 6 months. I've not done anything in the film industry. It's all been AI. And with that, I have encountered a lot of problems, trying to create actual images, representations, and that. So you could slide now quickly. You have seen this work from the Elder series, fashion show for the elders. Yeah, they look elegant. Yeah, they look like this, but I'll tell you, this was not the images I was getting when I was first starting to try to create these images. I work with a software, one in particular, called Midjourney, and I use that because they create the most photorealistic kind of images, but that means that it should represent the right, type of images, right? But wrong, unfortunately. If you go next, the next one is the Ngochola tribe. It's a fictional tribe that I was trying to create, that represented a part of fictional Africa. I'm still not where I wanted to get to, but if I show you the earlier images, you would understand how I got here. And our representation, like, I've been facing these problems for a while now, even before the AI industry even, had this boom. Because, for instance, I'd look for like a stock image or a stock picture or video of a certain maybe Black community or Black person doing something. I'd never find it. It's always generic, representation. There's always generic things, and even the cultures are always very, very, very stereotypical. So that was a problem for me. So I always had to film things that I was trying to create, and I always had to change that representation. So everything I do is backed by intentional storytelling, and that's to correct the perception of what we're like. Go next. So I did some things for the Adobe website before they launched the Firefly. I think they were trying to test it. I created some images, for the website, just to show, like, because there was nothing literally like, that represented this kind of culture. So that was this. So I just wanted to just show you the things that I've done while I go into the bias and the problem. So we could go next. Yeah. So the first thing is the misrepresentation goes far. Like, it goes really far, even beyond what these machines get, because like it feeds off data, you know, scrubs of data, and it's what it's trained on that it's, you know, would put out there. So now the question is, who's training it? You know, and the people that train it, why are they training it? Do they have the right credentials to train this? You know, do they have the right backgrounds to train it? Because you can't speak about different culture if you know nothing about that culture. So for instance, this is from the Midjourney AI, and when you type in a small or enough, give me an image of an African village. I could show you thousands of African villages in Nigeria that do not look like this, you know, but this is the only types of images I was getting. You know, I literally did this yesterday just to something, but no, this was yesterday. I just said, give me an image, like, and I did more variations and more variations. I even add modern to some, but no, the modern thing could be maybe the roof would change, but the environment was still this. And it's not that, but I don't even understand why we're being represented like this, because even in the media, we've gone past this, but this is what they understand. So that means what it's been trained on is obviously the wrong information. Let's go to the next one. So also, before I even get into this, you saw the images of the first kind of images I was getting for affluent Africans. You know, this was the representations of what an African elder luxury looks like, you know, just a few weeks before the elder series. So I literally had to train it. I literally had to feed it with references. I literally had to make you understand, you know, certain things in textures, materials before I actually got to that image. And I was wondering why, like, why? You know, that was my question I kept asking, why. Like, the more I kept on creating, the more I kept on seeing all the loopholes and the problems, and it made me understand that we actually have to be part of that solution. We can't just ask why. We have to literally tell our stories, you know. So what's the next one? Yes, if you go onto Midjourney right now and you type in African boy, this is what you see. I have a son, he's African. My son don't dress like this. You know, he doesn't wear scarves, and like, this is the only kind of African representation you see. And they put like a pixel, like a pixel type of a cartoon just to, you know, soften it, but that's still not it. And I did 10 variations of it. I just didn't want to put it on the slide, but I did 10 variations, and every single variation came out with dreadlocks, scarves, you know, just, you know, looking like this. And that representation is wrong. Let's go to the next one. Black boy. So I just wanted to show you the different variations of boy. When you type in black boy, it shows you a Black American kid in a hoodie. Like, I also did 10 different variations of this, and this is all the kind of images I was getting. So when you type in boy, you could go to the next one now. You could type in boy 10 or 100 times, you're always going to get this type of images. A luxurious, affluent white kid. And so, you know, it's a question you will ask, like, why, you know? And this happens with literally anything, boy, girl, man, woman. You know, if you type in anything that has to do with a professional, a doctor, you will always get a male Caucasian doctor. Not even a female Caucasian, like always a male. So it just shows how far the bias is, and they don't even care how far this bias is, because you can't represent certain things like this. If you say you're fed in data off the internet and whatnot, you need to find ways to regulate that data that is actually correct. It's like going into a stock website and you just put in everything in one category without caring, and just put in one as a superior category. So that doesn't even make any sense. So what's the next slide? Yeah, so this is another representation. So that I'm just happy that, you know, I was listening to Arsenni just now talking about this whole thing, because it just speaks about
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
To interrupt you, Malik. Could our attendants, if you've got your mic on, could you please put it on mute? We are currently hearing someone's dog in the background. Thank you. All right, Malik, sorry about that. Back to you.
No, that's all right. So, like, I understand how we have our culture misrepresented, lost as well. Like we don't even have places to go and find the right references. So we need to change it, like change it with intentionally, like because I go for references and I look at the references that I put out there. It's never put out there by an African. So why are you talking about our culture when you don't even know about that? So we as Africans need to be part of the creators. We need to be part of the people that are the policymakers. We need to be part of the people that are actually telling our stories, right? So we can't just sit back and talk about the bias or sit back and talk about the problems and just talk about them. We actually need to be the change and change makers in the sense that we're actually telling the right stories through content, through photography, music, in that it has to be intentional. Like Arsenni was saying, it's intentional for the other cultures, because when you put a bad prompt, you would never get the images. You would say it goes against our policies. But when you put in the other, well, that means no one regulates that side of it. That means no one really cares about that side of it. And now is the time to understand that representation actually does matter, because for the next generation, if the AI starts to understand that this is what our culture looks like, this is what our livelihood looks like, then that's what it's going to fit on for the next, trainings, or it's going to be that. It's going to be hard to, to train it and to change that. The way is hard to change the mindset now when it comes to racism and all of that. That's how hard it's even going to be harder, because now this is data and it's fed off data that's been trained. And all they have to do is train that data with the wrong information, then boom, we're up to the worst kind of bias. What's the next slide? Kind of like some pointers that I feel like would maybe help, this misrepresentation and this of our cultures and everything, is if, like I said earlier, we're actually part of that solution. The way I train my neural network is very, very unorthodox. It's not the way they would do it. Is because I use this for like big corporations. So I need to be very, very sure about the kind of output that I'm getting. I need to be sure about the kind of prompts, and so I kind of train it to understand my language. So that's why I get certain kinds of results, but that's trained. But yes, it's going to be on the wider network, but we need to collectively do this, from different places, but just representing your culture the right way. And that's all you need to do in every field of work that you're doing. Because if you're posting a picture out there, it's going to be online, and that will be represented in a way. Somehow it's going to end up in part of the data that it fits. So it goes beyond just the AI thing. It's back to us as creators, as human beings as well. How do we represent ourselves, or how do we want to be represented? But for the mid-journey software, I'd feel like they should, do more diverse training, because it's not just Africa is not a country, it's a continent, and you have many different cultures, many different heritage, so many things. Like you need to learn about those things. If you don't learn about it, find people to learn about them and actually be active in that space to feed the right data. I was about to talk about a job I'm working on right now, but I signed NDA so I can speak about. But it's a massive park that were previously representing African cultures as one Africa, and it's a big park. But now they decided to change it up to different cultures, different countries, different sides of Africa to represent it. But it's 2023, and they've been around for like almost 60 years. But it's a good thing that they're changing it now, but that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is with this: they should hire more Black, African, Asian, different cultures of engineers that could actually fit the right things, or regulate it or check for if this is right or wrong, and actually actively change it at the back end, because they could do that. They have different updates that come out every. I don't know how often they bring an update, but with this update they change something, and yeah, the 5.2 update right now, I don't use it at all. I keep on using 5.1 because 5.2 is also misrepresenting African cultures. It's going towards the Asian traditions for the African cultures, and I keep wondering why. And so I don't even use 5.2. I'm waiting for 5.3 to come out. I've complained, but no one said anything. So hopefully 5.3 that will sort something out. So all these things, we need to find a way to get into that space to maybe change these policies or change the narrative. The next one. I'll share the slide as well, so if anybody wants to go through and read it. And yeah, I was going to share the early images that I got when I was trying to create the fashion show for the Elders and the Elder series. And this is I could have put a prop there, but this is what a luxurious African man in a suit is meant to look like. I don't know what he's wearing there. That's a mushroom or something. I don't know. But you can go to the next one. That is meant to be also an affluent African Nigerian man. You know, I don't know what's going on there. Let's go to the next one. And that's meant to be a fashion show behind the scenes of a fashion show. They look like mummies. So it was a lot. Like it took a bit of work. It took a bit of understanding where it came from, understanding why, and I kind of understand it. And it goes beyond, you know, this AI software. Like, you know, Arsenni rightfully said, you know, what's being put out there is actually what it fits on. So what are we putting out there? How do we see this global culture of representation? Yeah, you can go to the next one. So this was the early image for the Ingo that I was trying to create. I don't know what's going on the thing there. So, but you can tell that it's very generic. It's very, just mix and match in many things. And yeah, you can go to the next one. Or is it, oh, that's the last one, yeah?
That is the last.
That is the last one. So it just comes down to me asking all this question that how serious is this to us as, you know, a community, a culture, as creators. To me, is very key. It's part of the things that I always do. I always make sure my content, my information, my stories are credible, you know, right, you know, because of the fact that there is not a lot of history or history books for us to go back to. So people always go back to pop cultures, film, and things for references. You know, I know how the Hollywood shaped the world in terms of the films and, you know, music cultures, how we dress, content shapes the world, storytelling shapes the world, whether you like it or not. So we could be part of that, you know, movement, but we have to tell the right stories. We have to actually take it seriously and not just tell things for entertainment reasons right now, but for, you know, references, and because of also for the fact that no one cares about all these things, we have to care about them, you know. So yeah, on that note, I guess I just, you know, I'm ready for questions. So that's just me sharing my experience for the past 6 months using the Midjourney. I use the Midjourney software a lot. That's what I used to create most of the AI things, mixed with, you know, Photoshop and all of that. And in terms of ethics as well, let me speak about ethics for a little bit. Right now, because we're still trying to regulate things, so that's part of why I train it on my own neural network and my own images, my own everything, because of the fact that I don't want to create something for a big corporation and someone comes and say, "Oh, that looks like me," or that looks like something, and, you know, so lawsuits, and I try to avoid that. So I curb that with my own creations of it, and I try to work with a few companies abroad. One of them is called TruePic. TruePic, what they try to do is sign each image, so you could trace where that image has passed through, whatever software, where it came from, where it gathers data from. They're currently backed by Meta on a $30 million thing. I think, I don't know, I'm not too sure about that, but it's a startup. So it's what I keep saying we're trying to do, because nothing is definite right now. We're still trying to understand the technology. The government is still trying to understand it. People are going on strike about this thing. So hopefully we find a balance, and we find a space where everything can, you know, play the right way, you know, ethically. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you both very, very, very much for a really stimulating discussion. I'm especially grateful for the fact that, you know, you're both coming from different perspectives, but I still feel like you're talking to each other. It's not every day that you get fashion and visual artistry sort of merged with global health narrative. So thank you for that, and I'm sure our participants sort of appreciated listening to that. I'm going to go straight ahead and open up a conversation for questions. We already have some in the chat room. So Yantina has got a question for you, Malik, about that journey from the early images to the later ones that you're most satisfied with, and how did you get to that point of satisfaction? Did that involve training the AI, submitting more images, drawing things yourself? What did that journey entail?
Yeah, it definitely entailed training it. It definitely entailed me fitting in with the right images, making more variations of those images, back and forth, taking those images into Photoshop, altering it, putting it back into it, and make more variations of that. So I kept on doing that like for a while. I kept on training it on the kind of figures that I wanted before I started to get the actual image that I want. But it took a while. Because these things just come out with the most random things. So I had to find a way to get the exact images that I was trying to look for. So I went from clothing to skin textures to the right pose so and it took time. So what also helped me was the more they update the softwares, that would help me in terms of how better the textures would look or how photorealistic it was. So I was just molding it, to fit the right narrative, because they'll always come out with something very generic, something very biased. So I'll just mold it to fit what I wanted to fit.
Thank you. We've got another question from Mavis. Thank you to the presenters. I understand the need to be part of the global space, but how about leading by starting and curating a repository that those working on and with Africa in mind can start to train their own data in? Is this happening now? A little like has been happening in some ways of working with diverse health data. Oh, a little like has been happening in some ways of working with diverse health data produced on the continent. Any of you want to respond to that comment?
Do you want to take yes, any? Yeah.
You're on mute, Arsenni.
Sorry, I might have missed the question. I was replying to like a direct message in chat. Which question am I addressing now?
To Mavis about leading by creating a repository that those working on and with Africa in mind can start to train their own data in.
Yeah, I think there are like several issues at hand, because I think ideally, in order to kind of quote unquote invert stereotypical global health tropes, we really need to send Black African doctors to to somewhere in Europe, and then like walking in the impoverished white neighborhoods, and we need to fit those photos into the system to be able to invert. And also in relation to this, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they recently announced 49 AI-based projects that they specifically will be there in the global south to kind of tackle with chronic social inequalities and issues. And of course, these projects, they're not going to be about images, but assuming that the generative AI comes with the biases, we can assume, just knowing the nature of AI and knowing the nature of global health, that there will be a lot of problems. And I think Mavis is asking great questions, like how do we create meaningful systems for governance, for accountability, and how can we push back? Because it's hard.
Yeah, very true.
Malik, do you want to say something
I agree. It's necessary. It's conversations I've been having as well. But it takes people to like think within that space, because I've spoken to creators, I've spoken to engineers, I've spoken to back end people, but it takes for us to actually want to do it. I want to do it. Well, it has to be a collective decision as well, because it's not something that it's not like a side thing. We have to monitor, we have to get the right data, and by getting the right data, like you rightfully said, you need to send Black doctors to Europe to actually get the right things. So we don't have those things. We don't have this invented things. So, but we should start to think about how to create these things just to get the right data. But it's not going to be easy. But I feel like first of all, conversations about it is the key thing. That when we start to think about it, then hopefully one day we can implement something. But it's been spoken about.
Just to maybe push a little further on Mavis's question, are you aware of any networks that are taking networks on the continent or even in the diaspora that are taking a more activist stance to some of these issues of misrepresentation that you're talking about?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, same here, and we're just hoping that that where like this kind of the critical number of concerns would like turn into something qualitative change. So far, we're just like very sporadic criticisms, and hopefully, like the voices will be heard. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got another question, question from Cornelius, who is asking about whether or not bias goes beyond who classifies the training data to include the words that are used to categorize data or prompt generative AI. For example, is there a way the use of the word traditional also shifts relations of power when standard definitions of this word include things like substandard, non-conventional, etc.? Who determines African healers as traditional African healers?
Yeah, I think this is if I may, I think this is a great question. So in this exercise, I was like with traditional African healers, I was just kind of role playing as someone from the comms teams from the global health organizations, because like traditional African healer, at least in global health, is kind of standardized term. I mean, there is a lot of anthropological critique because it's like very generic, it's like very blank, but yet in kind of mainstream global health, it is a term and it's being like challenged, but academically, but yet again, it's being still reproduced systematically as part of the culture of global health. But yeah, I think this is like a fascinating research question. Like what is the meaning of those words that we input, and how the semantics kind of like how exactly the words are turned into images. I think this is a fascinating question. I wish I could answer it. Maybe Malik knows, but
it's like you said, it's an interesting question, and it's deeper than what you think about it, because now that word could mean different things to different cultures, to different people, so how do we classify those things, and where do we classify those things? So when you think about it from the point of view of where's data gotten from, so that's where you think about it from as well. So how do we change these meanings, or how do we correct a particular perception of things? But the way I see it, it's mostly from how we represent things in the social media, in pop culture and television. And when things are represented on television, is mostly generic. It's one way. It's like black and white. It's not. They don't go deeper into those things. It's only in few things. So we need to, like I said, where is the data gotten from? So we should find deeper places or deeper meanings to things, and apart from just taking things off the surface. But that would, have to do with the developers or the back-end people, because if they could have policies to regulate certain words, then they could find ways to go deeper in certain, place to find, the right data, I feel like. But yeah, hopefully they will start to think in that direction, but they're not doing that right now.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Yeah, one thing that I also actually forgot to include, speaking of kind of exotization and like very generalistic or like simplistic images. For instance, I ran a couple of prompts for Egyptian doctors, and it would literally show me doctors with like pyramids and sphinx behind them. So which again shows you that, Egypt is pyramids, African doctors is stereotypical wildlife. I'm surprised I didn't see a baobab tree. Maybe if I run the number of prompts that I would actually see a baobab tree. So yeah, and I was actually looking for like Chinese doctors. It would only show me like doctors almost like in militant quote unquote communist uniforms. So there is definitely a lot of like generic exaggerated stuff. And how do we challenge that? Yeah, it's.
So just to get on that question of how you challenge that, I noticed something quite interesting about like just looking at your presentations next to each other, and it goes to this issue of techno-solutionism, that you can use technology to solve social problems.
Yeah.
What is your take on that viewpoint? Because I mean, Arsenni, you were very clear that these problems are baked into the very fabric of the modern world, right? There's structures, whether you call it racism or coloniality, etc. And Malik, I'm not necessarily implying that you're guilty of the solutionism, but I noticed that a lot of your suggestions were at the level of including the right kinds of people to engage in technical fixes to the problem.
Yeah.
So I just want to get your thoughts on this general notion of techno-solutionism and the extent to which problems that are deeply social could possibly have technological fixes. I'm not saying that they can't necessarily, but I'm interested in your views on that notion of technical fixes to social problems.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to go first, Arsenni, or should I take this?
Yeah, it's up to you. I just have like one comment again about the technical solutions. So if you don't mind, just give me like a minute. So one thing that I think is problematic is that AI is being kind of increasingly portrayed as kind of a magic bullet type of solution. Because, for instance, one of the projects that has been funded by Gates as of a week ago is I think, I don't remember the context, but it's about like support for rape victims. So they could use artificial intelligence like chatbots to get access to mental health counseling and legal support. But then again, this is just the problem isn't, yeah, the issue is rape in the first place, lack of access to primary healthcare for many people, and lack of access to counseling services and legal services. So by offering technical solutions in the form of AI bots, because I can imagine they will be helpful to a certain extent, you jump over all the inequalities that have been there, and you just pretend that they don't exist. Well, not you, just people who are really kind of into using AI to solve all the chronic issues. Yeah, on that note, Malik, to you.
Well, yes, I would say that it's a tricky thing from my point of view, because of the fact that if you're getting actual solutions for social issues, who is behind the training of this AI machine, and how involved are this people in the community that have these social issues? How involved are they to your solutions? Because do you know the actual problems, the real problems? It could be something surface, because everything I see from the AI perspective is on surface level. They don't really go, never really goes deep enough to understand the actual things. So if the key people are not involved, that's what I spoke about, involving the right people to train us in the right way. If you're not involved in the right trainings, then you don't have the right data. And technology is relatively dependent on data. No matter what kind of data it is, it's dependent on that data. So, and it goes after that data is done. It's whatever you fit it, it fits out, something based out of that. So what is it being fed? Is it being fed something at surface level, or something that actually does, goes deeper to understand the key things, the right colors, the right, representation, the right percentages of things? Like, if you're really intelligent as an AI software, you would know the right percentages of black to white doctors. You will know, when you should not invert things or invert things, but rather the focus on other things. I could tell you 10 different advancements from the AI thing when it comes to the military and all of that. But the key things is now we are talking about military automations and killing drones. But when you don't still understand ethnic people or the right cultures, that was just, there will be a bias with that as well. There will be profiling as well. So that is a big problem. We can't even get to that space when we don't talk about the representation on the smaller angles. And that means if they don't care enough, when I mean they, I mean the developers, to get this right data, get the people that will get this right data. And these people are people that actually, either you're getting research from the right spaces, or you go to the spaces and learn about the things. It's like having an encyclopedia without the right things in it. And you want to use that encyclopedia to solve world issues. You can't do that now. And people are looking at AI as a solution to things. But how could it be a solution when you have the wrong data? So that's how I look at it. So before we could get to using it as a solution, we need to first of all fit it with the right thing. So you understand.
I want to combine Yantina's and Mavis's question. So beginning with Yantina, who makes the observation that if Arsenni can be seen as describing a particular problem. Oh, I just noticed I could hear myself echoing.
Sorry, I had to switch.
No worries. If if Arsenni is describing, is tracking a particular problem, in this case, using AI to sort of archive stereotypes and biases in global health photography. And Malik, I think this was emphasized towards the end of your presentation. You're focusing on what work would we need to do to be able to change these outcomes, right? And your focus on diversity and inclusion, and even a lot of the technical work you did around redrawing images and doing this sort of deep training. And so I think there's a question there about, what activism, AI activism could look like if you had to sort of, if you looked at these problems and from there came to the conclusion that we need some kind of concerted collective action to change the situation, what would that kind of activism look like? And I think this is also linked to, at least we can make the link to Mavis's question around what's the role of what are the particular linguistic dimensions of that activism? Mavis asking about if one important issue is the language used as well. If it doesn't represent the diversity of African languages, then training data is itself also problematic. So I'm curious to know about what you guys, how you would define a project of AI activism, and also what are the specific linguistic dimensions to that problem? I hope I...
Okay, but okay, when you approach it, like I always approach it as a tool, like I would approach any other tool, and how I use it is what actually does matter. So if I was to use it, for instance, what I do, first of all, has to do with the Nigerian society, the Nigerian cultures, and everything that I would not speak about a Ghanaian society or cultures because I don't know about it, and I wouldn't try to create things. So if I was to do something like that, I'd do some research, maybe speak to people from there to get the right data. Like I'll do a real documentary or a real project. That's how you need to approach it. I approach this like I approach real life. So if I was to create a picture, for instance, I always put all the settings that I put on my camera, I fit it to that as well. The kind of lighting and what I fit it. So all those technical things also help me, and it helps the output as well. So that's part of how I train it as well, to be very, very specific and intentional with the type of thing that I want. And when it doesn't understand it, then I start to fit it images or fit it things to make it understand. That's how I do it. That's a way that I do it. But the user, the creator, whoever is using that software needs to understand, first of all, that there's a representation problem, there's a bias in this thing. So when your keywords need to be extra specific. If they're not extra specific, you're not going to get the images you're looking for. So you will always get those bias things. And sometimes, even when you're extra specific, you still not get the images. You have to find. That's why sometimes I take it into Photoshop and really literally just alter it. Like my pen, just alter, I put it back there. This is what I do. It's hard. Like, for instance, what you said about the colors switching from white to black, I would have to use Photoshop sometimes to change the color scheme because I can't get that, out of the AI machines. So I don't depend on it. To me, it's still a tool, but the tool that has to be fed the right data. So if you're creating something off of that tool, make sure what you're creating is, feeding out the right data, is credible. You're feeding it the right data of what you want. And if you're not getting what you want, try your best to make you understand. That's by feeding the images like over and over again and making variations of it. Before you know it, it's already stored on that network. So it starts to create things, linking that picture to the keywords of what you're looking for. So somehow it understands it, and somehow it starts to create things in that image. So that's my point of view from my experience of how I see it.
And I think Malik had a great slide with just certain pragmatic steps that, like people who work on the AI and on the data, there should be more regional representation, right? That someone ideally from different communities, engineers from various backgrounds, they should work on this. I don't know who is currently working on Midjourney, but something tells me that probably they should hire more people from the global south.
Yeah, definitely.
We have a question from Rade to Arsenni. Did you notice any form of gender misrepresentation or lack of female representation in response to AI-generated images of doctors, or was there an equal representation in that regard?
No. I think this is like another thing that I'm kind of preparing to write about slowly. is, yeah, because for the most part, if this were, for the most part, are just men. And I ran like a prompt for NHS doctor. And again, sociologically, doctors in the UK, they are diverse of various social backgrounds, but AI would only show me just white men. And the same thing for nurse. I ran like 80 prompts for just NHS nurse, and it would just show me only white women, which is again sociologically very, very biased. And in all the images, like probably in most of the images with the flipping, where they would show you like white doctors instead of black doctors, it's mostly men. I still need to kind of dive into the kind of gender dimension of that, but it's definitely there. And probably Malik has similar experiences with like the way there's a lot of assumptions about like gender that comes from prompts.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, because I created images for Adobe, so I had that problem a lot. Like it was war, because from genders to cultural representations and all of that, it's still prevalent. Like today, if you type in roles or professions, occupations, you just always get like a white male. So I really wonder why they haven't seen this thing or done something about it. But yeah, I have.
We are very lucky that both of you were very within time, managed time very well in your presentation. So we still have another 30 minutes for questions and answers. So is there anyone who's who would like to come off the a bit worried that Arsenni and Malik have only been seeing my face? So maybe someone wants to come video. Otherwise, I'll keep reading the questions in the chat.
Can I ask the question to the audience? So what do you think about the fact that WHO is using already AI rendered images, like the image that I showed you, like a kid standing miserably in a field? Because I think there could be two justifications that their justification is that they bypass the question of consent because it's just a fake image. And also it's cheaper than hiring a photographer. However, as we discussed, it feeds from real data. So someone miserable for real had to stand, probably more than one, for AI to be able to reproduce that. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that question to you. Like, what about organizations that are already big organizations that might be tempted to use AI tools?
Does anyone want to say anything in response to Arsenni's question?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, I can tell you that I think in 2021, WHO actually created a policy that that generative AI should not be used for global health purposes. Yet 2 years later, they bypassed the regulation that they created or guidance. So I don't know. It's
Mavis, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. And then I realized that I was still thinking. But I think my my gut feeling is that we should be pushing the WHO to do different, right? Part of the problem is the kind of systematic power imbalance that is perpetuated by these kinds of activities. So as Arsenni says, if it's better, it might be more expensive, but if it's better to hire a photographer to actually go and take those images, then why don't we do that? I think when you constantly hear that, well, it's cheaper to do it this way, then that just tells me that actually the people in decision-making positions don't want actual change, because actual change means having to change the way that you work, even if that is the cheaper way to do it, but empowering the people who are impacted by your policies to actually be part of that. So you can't have people impacted participating only downstream. It has to involve, well, the people that are impacted need to go and take those photos in the way that is most meaningful to them, and then we tag them and use those for whatever kind of adverts or policies we want the WHO to then be involved in. So I mean, the short answer is it's problematic, and I don't think the WHO should be doing it. The long answer is that it's complex because then it involves funding decisions and timescales. And sometimes when you need something implemented, you want it done quickly, right? If you're the person who's receiving the benefits, you might say, actually, let's just go ahead and use the generated images because that gets us our product a lot quicker. But I think those conversations need to be had at the same table rather than kind of dividing the people who are benefiting with the people who are making those decisions.
Thank you for that, Mavis. I have a brief sort of comment to your question, Arsenni, and or I guess a comment or a reading of it is that if I make the assumption that although it's called global health, a lot of the global health work tends to take place in the global south, then the argument that it is cheaper to use AI generated images is part of a broader pattern of, making work so photography in this case as one area of work, making it more precarious. And so in that regard, I see it as a relationship between technology and an evolving pattern of precaritization in the global south.
Can I push that even further? Because actually, like this AI thing that I did, it was the kind of the side project of my main research. So I interviewed 30 global health photographers. So actually, and what seems to be happening is that fake images, they're not started with AI, but fake images, they started with the history of global health, because a lot of images, they're staged. And photographers openly admit that they stage images, whether this is suffering or empowerment. There are certain little tricks and that they use to kind of create those images. So in that sense, like the fake images, they've been around global health for quite some time. And another thing, it's not just about AI generated images, because many of the organizations, they just use stock images. I actually embarked on a journey. I tried to trace generic global health images, quote to quote, see what they end up representing, and it's wild. It's just like the same photos being used for like 20 purposes. So in a sense, it's kind of fake image, but it's not fake, right? But it represents something else. So like AI in that sense is not unique, right? It's a question about how those original images are created, and other practices such as recycling images. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got some more commentary in the chat room. Chat room. I think Suzanne says fabricating images brings in extra issues of authenticity. I think this might be a response to your question, Arsenni. However staged a photograph is, it's based on some material reality. A generated image requires extra care about what is being put out into the world, I think. I mean, I really think that, like you said, this distinction between real and fake is itself very tendentious. I mean, we take for granted that these are stable divisions, but I think your last commentary just undermines a lot of that. Do we have any other questions? I think there was someone asking for some guidance about, yes, so this is Jamie, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Are there conventional best practices in generative AI for random photo taking or generating them? Can you share these procedures? Malik, do you maybe want to say something about that?
Like I said earlier, you would approach this like you would approach any other tool. And if you were to take a photographer, like a camera to take a photograph, you would have to think about the subject, think about the location, think about the type of lighting, the kind of lens you want to use, the kind of costuming, if it's something creative or what you're trying to tell, what's the story. For me, what I do is it starts with a story before every other thing. Because like I said, everything I do is mostly intentional with storytelling. So when I get the story, then every other thing follows through, and I approach it the same way I approach real life. If I was to create a photograph or a film or something, I'll think about the whole thing, and I would try to achieve that, using a camera or using a software or whatever it is. So that's how I look at it. So all the technical words that I would use, or like for instance, if I was to set the camera with a particular ISO, with a particular shutter speed and all of that, I'll feed it all that data. And the good thing is it understands the technical data. So if I wanted a particular type of lens, a focal point, I could get it, by feeding it the type of data. So that's my kind of best practice that I use to get the types of things that I want. So and I've experimented with a bunch of things, even words that are not that are slangs in the industry, but it still understands those. So you just approach it like a tool. Approach it like you would approach any other tool. Just understand its capabilities and what it could do for you. It could generate images, and now those images must represent what you're trying to represent. So it's easy for you to just take an image, because it looks nice, but it doesn't represent what you're trying to tell. So stick to it. Stick to your story. Stick to your what you're trying to tell, and that's how I do it.
Thank you. I see we've been sharing some resources in the chat. Thanks, Abdul, and thanks for sharing your paper as well, Arsenni. Maybe we can address. Oh, sorry. We've got a question now from Cornelius. I want to push back a bit because I am really curious. A linguistic dimension of AI activism is evidently a fantastic idea, but I worry if this will not raise new concerns around epistemic harm and how this may be anticipated or addressed. Such a project, I think, will inevitably include making judgments about an adequate way to render or conceptualize certain modes of being. Who makes this judgment, and why should we accept their judgment as credible and not others?
So I think I understand your question. So if I was in Nigeria, I'm from Benin City. It's a that's where I'm from. I've never been there before, but I know about its history. I've read it about everything in books and in films and all of that, the artifacts and that. But if I was to create something that had to do with Benin City, because of the fact that I've never been there before, I would have to go there, to learn about that space, and I could now, create things within that. I'd be credible to do that because I've done my research. I'm from there, or I've been around that space, or I've related with people from there. I've gotten the right information that I need from diverse sources, and and it's credible. So I could create from that. It's not that I would just make a decision out of a book and just say, oh, this is what it's meant to be, or this is what it is, and that's what the AI does. It just makes a decision out of the data it gets, and they say this is what it is, that is what it is, which is not right. You need to understand, the intricate, the actual details of it, and so I feel like whoever has a right to tell the story is someone that has kind of related with that space, or is from that space, or has done the actual adequate research to be able to speak about that space the right way. Anything apart from that would just be a facade. That's how I see it.
Can I follow up? It's just a bit unrelated, so just a kind of comment in parallel about language, and because I think right now the inputs can be done only in English, if I'm not mistaken. But I fear that when all these companies decide to kind of allow people to use like other languages, they would probably embed something like online translator, something like this. So it will be again fed back to English, something like this, because I don't think that they would be bothering just trying to kind of authentically approach the language and kind of plug it in the system, rather than they would just probably use the translate just because it's already there and it's easier. Again, just assuming that it will happen because all these companies, they always try to run down the costs, which then leads to the major philosophical question about translation. What is lost in translation? What is changed in translation, especially if it's automatic?
Thanks, Arsenni. Two questions from Marlon. Malik, given your comments about involving more diverse engineers, who else should be involved in deciding what more diverse representations are? And if you could describe an ideal outcome for generative AI, what would it be? Is it only about greater diversity? I think this links back to one of the originary questions for this webinar as to, if we recognize that there are different political projects possible, coloniality one among them, what work should, AI, should we be looking to use AI to actually do?
That is a very tough question, and I say it's tough because I'm currently trying to work on a project. It's called To Decolonize Mentalities Using Art. It's a German thing. They're trying to decolonize, but the problem is you cannot decolonize mentalities. It's not even possible. So how do you even represent it? It's I had many conversations. I've thought about it, for many. How do you represent it? Because the reality of things is what happened. The reality is moving from it. How do you represent yourself now? So it's a deeper conversation than, letting the AI represent something or how you make it represent something. So that's why I say it's a very tough question, and I might need to ponder on that a bit more. I might need to ponder on it a bit more, because that is, we're actually having, actual conversations about that currently, and yeah, just give me some time to ponder a bit more, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But yeah.
Okay. Either of you feel free to pick up anything in the chat that invites a response from you.
I would like to follow up on Argentina's comment, because I think we mentioned Photoshop, and I think it's also quite interesting that it's not just Midjourney, and I think we should be actually probing for other generative tools, because in Photoshop they introduced with the last update the generative fill. So in like any area of the image can be also adjusted or cured based on the textual prompt. So think about this as like a Midjourney prompts, but it's like applied to part of the image. So yeah, it's automation, and I think it's just accelerating from the looks of it. Malik, do you have any do you have any experience with the generative fill?
Oh yeah. I have. I've used it. It's still pretty much on beta, and it's still pretty much inaccurate. I actually have used it a lot, but I feel like it's still being tested, because the type of images it brings out are not as good as what you would expect, from Photoshop. But some are impressive, some are not. So that's why I say it's still on a beta thing. But yeah, I have, and so far, it's what Adobe does is they don't take data from like the normal network that Midjourney or whatnot does. They use data from their stock websites and from creators that the licenses have expired. So most of the time they have limited data, so they have to work with that, and that's why it's still been trained on. And also, to go back to the previous questions about, is it only about greater diversity? It's very important, because I feel like it's a key thing. It's something that I can't really overlook, because that could spark up many other things and conversations afterwards. If the proper representation is sorted out, I feel like the kind of content that we will put out there that represents certain things from global health to every other thing will be different. So conversations will be different, perception will be different. So from my point of view, it's bigger than every other thing, because representation, if it's wrong from the get-go, it's just every other thing you're doing is wrong. Like the chain of things, like everything, like that's why WHO would use that kind of image in a generative AI. They still understand how bad the representation is. So I feel like, yes, for now, it's something that we need to actually focus on. That was your second question. And your first question is, who else should be involved in deciding what more diverse representations are? Yeah, like whoever is really interested in it, like the government should be interested in this thing. Like if they're interested in this thing, they'll probably know, how to find more people to regulate or to, create things that are right. I think every individual should be, interested, because if we as users, as individuals as well, are putting the right kind of data, there is still trained on that. So every single person like that, is involved in the right kind of history, the right kind of representation of cultures and heritage, should be, part of that, diverse engineer. Yeah.
So there's a question in the group around, well, I mean, if most of this conversation has been focused on how artificial intelligence represents the world, we can almost turn that focus on representation back to artificial intelligence itself and ask, how do we represent artificial intelligence, and how should we be looking to understand it? So I think this builds off on on your insistence on treating it, Malik, as a tool, and Yantina is juxtaposing this against, transhumanist or post-human conversations around, something that will surpass human intelligence or whatever. And so I'd like to get to your thoughts around, I guess in broad terms, the ways in which we talk about artificial intelligence at the moment, and what you think about this contrast between something, AI as a tool, but also AI as part of a broader set of ideas around, transforming what it means to be human, for lack of a better phrasing.
So what we need to understand, first of all, is it's going to be implemented in our everyday life, whether we like it or not. You're going to start to see AI in things like microwaves and televisions, and it's going to be whether you like it or not, and it's already getting there. So that means technology would always grow, whether you like it or not. So why not be a part of that growth in the right way? Because obviously we need to understand the tech as well. So if you don't, that's step one, actually understanding the tech. So if you don't understand what you're talking about, what its capabilities are, the branches of it, then you don't even understand how you could use it. It's there's a lot of garbage, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information when it comes to AI. So you have to literally streamline to what actually does matter to you. So when I'm creating with the AI things, I could get a bunch of images that could distract me, that could, throw me off my actual creative process. But because of the fact that I understand that it's just a tool, my Photoshop is just a tool, I would never let the Photoshop dictate my final process. I would never let the AI dictate my final process. That's how I see it, so it's just to enhance a certain process, or to, make me imagine something even broader, or to inspire me. So that's how I approach it. And that means that kind of informs, the final process of it. And that, just looking at it as a tool is how we approach it as well. So for instance, we want to use ChatGPT or want to use the Midjourney software to create. It's going to be that there'll be a time when it's crucial for you to use it, that you have to use it. It might sound like something bogus right now, but fast forward 2 or 3 years from now, it's going to be in your Microsoft Word, it's going to be in so it's going to be literally everywhere. And so now, but if you understand it now, you know the right tools to use, you know really how to use that in your life, you know how to direct it, you know how to make your life easier just by understanding the right things. Because the same way the boom is, that's the same way the unethical side will be, because it's going to be used for many things, from scamming to identity theft to so many other things. So, but how could you curb it if you don't understand it? How could you curb it if you don't know the tools, or to differentiate from the right ones or from deep fakes? And it's so hard to differentiate, but the more you use it, the easier for you to, kind of understand, what is and what isn't. But yeah, we're going to get to a space that we're not even going to be able to know that. But before we get there, let's just try and understand that it's like a remote control. It's like your Photoshop is like just something to enhance your current, work.
Thank you. Arsenni, any last comments?
Nothing comes immediately to my mind. I think there's been a very fruitful discussion. So
thank you both very much for your time and also for your scholarship. Again, I want to reiterate that I'm very appreciative of the fact that you both have managed to have a conversation across your different interests. You've given us a lot to ponder. Thank you to our attendees as well for giving up your time and also for contributing to a very lively discussion. And we look forward to seeing you at our other Ethics Lab conversations and debates and discussions as we continue to grow this community that takes seriously African and Global South locations, whether that's empirical or theoretical or conceptual, as we think about the ethical questions posed by new and emerging technologies. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all at our next event.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thanks, Asal.
Bye-bye, people.